Tonight's presenter, Mr. Bob Chaparro, is a friend of Temecula Valley Historical Society, as this is not his first presentation for us. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Today's presentation focuses on Hemet's railroads and depots through 3 centuries. Learning about the current and past depots in Hemet, we'll understand how several railroads influenced the city's growth and development, and how the city's history might have been quite different if there had been no tracks leading into the city. We'll also hear about recent efforts to save and preserve the current depot. And with that being said, Mr. Chaparro. Oh, you got it.
Can you hear me? Oh, good. Please use the microphone.
Okay, you do need it.
Now I've got 3 things to hold. Okay, now you can hear me and you can record. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Let me give you a little background on myself. I'm a board member of the Hemet Heritage Foundation, which is the owner and operator of the Hemet Depot Museum. My interest in history probably doesn't go back all that far. How I got to this point was that in 1967, I took up the hobby of model railroading. And if you're in that hobby for any length of time, you start to get more and more focused on being accurate. And so that led to doing more and more research, which led to things like this. So, you know, I have a very big interest in history. I'm sure all of my history teachers in high school would be amazed. But it grew on me. So we'll get started here. And I'm dedicating this to my daughter. She passed away in 2023, just a few miles from here at the local hospital. Some of the people I'd like to acknowledge that helped me with this and provided background and photos. And so what we're going to explore today are these points. And these points. Okay, back before the railroad came, Hemet was like a lot of communities in Southern California, sort of dependent on whatever they could grow, which in most cases would be wheat for dry farming because you didn't have irrigation. That's just the way it was, and the town was, the community was extremely small. So this is a scene of dry farming. Now, again, by the late 1800s, most of the towns had aspirations, but and they had no transportation, so they wanted railroads. Hemet was no exception. In 1880, the California Southern Railroad began building from National City south of San Diego to San Bernardino and beyond to connect with what was then the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad. The A&P was one of the first chartered transcontinental railroads, but they've had financial problems and they came under the joint control of the Santa Fe and the Frisco. Santa Fe controlled the western half. In 1885, the California Southern completed its line over Cajon Pass to the Southern Pacific's Needle branch at Barstow. This branch was leased to the Santa Fe, and that gave Santa Fe access to the coast at San Diego and National City. The California Southern formed the western end of Santa Fe's transcontinental connection to Chicago. A subsidiary of the California Southern, which was the California Central Railway, built a 19-mile line between Paris through Hemet to San Jacinto. At that time, San Jacinto was really the big dog in the valley. Hemet was not nearly as important. And so there you can see the way the railroads were way back when. Following a bankruptcy in 1895, the Santa Fe went from becoming a railroad to a railway in their corporate name. And of course, in more recent time, the Santa Fe merged with the Burlington Northern to form the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway. Okay, competition. We'll talk about this area a little bit. 1886, the new town of Murrieta was on the main line of the California Southern Railroad. San Jacinto, an older and more established town, was not served by any railroad at that time. So you had Charles Morrell, an attorney from San Diego, who owned property in both towns. Murrieta and San Jacinto, of course, were in San Diego County at that time, Riverside County not having been formed until 1893. Morrell wanted to connect the towns and thus ensure their viability in the northern reaches of what was then San Diego County. He persuaded several backers to incorporate the Murrieta and San Jacinto Railroad that would leave the main line at Murrieta, head 3 miles north to Murrieta Hot Springs, and eventually to San Jacinto. However, that railroad was never built. He had problems securing right-of-way, and that held back the progress, as was the financial backing that he thought he had disappeared. Within a few months, that railroad was dissolved. San Jacinto eventually received rail access via Paris and the San Jacinto Valley Railroad in 1888. So there's one of the first trains coming through the California Southern in Temecula. And there were limitations. What could have been possible didn't happen. Originally, Hemet was just 17 miles from the original transcontinental main line at Paris. But even before service was open to Hemet, nature was limiting the town's potential. In 1884, torrential rains knocked out 6 miles of the main line through Santa Margarita River in Temecula Canyon. And that's what the canyon looked like when they laid the rails. And at the time they were putting in that line, apparently some of the locals who were familiar with what happens when it rains said you need to locate this line higher, but they didn't. And that's what happened. More floods in 1891 wrecked the California Southern in various places. And as a result, the tracks linking Temecula and Fallbrook through troublesome Temecula Canyon were permanently abandoned. The people of Fallbrook apparently furnished funding for the Santa Fe to complete repairs between Oceanside and Fallbrook. Without the repairs, Fallbrook and Temecula would be just spots on the end of 2 branch lines, no longer on the transcontinental main line. There was no money forthcoming from the other communities, and even though those parties made numerous complaints to the California Railroad Commission. Santa Fe by then had built a new line from on the coast from Oceanside to Orange County. So Fallbrook, Temecula, Murrieta, Elsinore, and Paris all fell off the transcontinental main line. With Paris off the main line, Hemet's future suffered a corresponding blow. And so that's what it looked like after they abandoned that section. Now, if you're on Railroad Canyon Road, just to the east of Lake Elsinore, you can still see the main line roadbed. It's right along the creek there. And if you look at this picture and you head up towards the upper right-hand corner, that goes to Canyon Lake. So another problem was the abandonment of the Lakeview Spur. Now, probably most of you have never heard of Lakeview. It's a small community out there. It's to the east of Paris, and the line was open in 1898. They mainly were interested in tapping into some of the cattle raising that was going on. Plus, there was on this lake that was there a resort. And so that was operated by the California Southern and eventually the Santa Fe. There was also a previous agreement to extend from San Jacinto a line west to connect to Lakeview. That was a paper railroad, the San Jacinto, Lakeview, and Northern Railway. It was organized to construct that railroad, but that never happened. If they had constructed that, that would have brought more business to the area, just as it had to Paris and San Jacinto and Hemet. This segment was never built, although several miles were graded. I have actually walked what's left of that. There's virtually nothing left of it. A little bit of roadbed appears in various areas. All of the water courses where they would have had bridges show no sign of bridges anymore. Everything's gone. So this is north of Hemet. This is the Ramona Expressway. San Jacinto is out here. And then this is Ramona Road, which is basically the old roadbed. And if you stop along here, you can actually see the old roadbed that would have been headed over to Lakeview. Okay, that spur was taken out of service in '37. The traffic that they hoped would build on that line never really occurred, so it was no big deal to lose it. That connection would have put Hemet on a continuous loop from just south of Paris to just north of Paris. It would have been good for business, didn't happen. Again, here's the Lakeview spur. Oh, come on. Okay. Nevertheless, the development did continue. The arrival of the railroad in 1888 facilitated the inbound movement of construction materials for the Hemet Dam. That was located east of Hemet, what is now Garner Valley. The dam was constructed between 1891 and 1895. Cement for that dam came from Belgium. It came by ship. There was no Panama Canal, so it had to go around the Horn and up to San Diego, and then brought by train up to San Jacinto. The cement for that dam came in 400-pound barrels, and so there were a lot of barrels that were shipped up there. The completion of the dam was really a great thing for Hemet because it expanded agricultural opportunities beyond what they were doing in dry farming and ranching. There is a colorized version of the dam. You see a lot of smaller boulders there, but actually behind that, the dam had very large blocks of stone that were put together with cement to hold all the water back. Okay, inbound traffic for the town's new automobiles and petroleum products came by way of the railroad. All the automobiles sold in Hemet up into the 20s all came by train because the road system just wasn't good enough. Other inbound commodities included cement, lumber, electrical equipment, and cans for the city's 2 canneries. Initially, the railroad handled outbound shipments of deciduous fruit, olives, citrus crops, and also rose stock. Now, in those old days, a lot of the canneries did not have facilities for making cans on site, so your cans were delivered by boxcar. And this is what it looked like. It was very labor intensive. They would pull the cans out of the stack and put them on a little conveyor there to roll down into the cannery. Now, this is not from Hemet, but it was typical of the way you got your car way back when. You'd go down to the depot and you'd get it off the dock. So here's some of the customers in Hemet over the years. I won't read them all. I'll just let you have a look. And potatoes were a very big thing in the area just north of Hemet. Okay, as time went on, both inbound and outbound traffic declined, mostly due, as in all areas of the country, to the growth of the local road system. 1958 was one of the last good years. Had over 1,000 inbound carloads and 345 outbound carloads in the first 11 months. But by 1966, those totals were down quite a bit. There was hardly anything in the 70s. And by the 90s, the Santa Fe operated a train beyond Paris to Hemet over what was 10-mile-an-hour track, only on an as-needed basis. So here's a scene from the earlier good days. And here they're switching refrigerator cars, probably for the potato rush. And then between San Jacinto and Hemet, there was a Y that they used to use to turn the steam locomotives. It was still being used by the diesel locomotives. There's a picture from the 50s. 6 years later, all operating steam locomotives were gone from the Santa Fe except for excursions. And here's one of the local freights. And another one. And this is a scene looking north from the depot. Another scene looking the same way. Okay, the small building behind the trees there was one of the Hemet orange packing houses. I'll comment a little on the packing houses. I interviewed a citrus grower about 8 years ago. He was retired. And as we got to talking, I said, well, I assume you took your oranges to the local packing house. And he said, no. I said, what'd you do with them? He said, I trucked them up to Riverside. And I said, why? He said, well, the fella I bought my groves from got into a big dispute with the owner of the packing house and swore he'd never do business with him again. And I just sort of continued the tradition. More scenes. There's the cannery. There's the Walnut Packing House. And here's some labels from the firms that operated in Hemet. One of the last businesses to go out of business was a bulk petroleum dealer close to the downtown. Now, in many, many communities that were agriculture, bulk petroleum dealers were very important because they brought in kerosene that used to be a major fuel used on farms. So this place is now gone. Here's the other Hemet packing house. And two of the big customers for the railroad were the one of the several potato shippers and the Howard Rose Company. Now, the Howard Rose Company at one time had over 1,000 acres in the Hemet area, and they were world famous for developing various hybrids of roses, and they shipped their rose stock all over the world. That lasted probably up into the 60s, and the man running it, and I won't mention his name because he's very well known in Hemet, but the man running it was the son of one of the founders, and he got into disputes with the state's agriculture inspectors and just said, I'm not going to do it your way. Well, he got in trouble for that, and the business went into the ground. That's one of the last receivers in Hemet, the LP Denny beer distributor. And then this was one of the other major customers of the railroad, very important, Agra Empire. They're up in San Jacinto. They have a different owner now. I'll give you a little story about this. When the railroad started to lose a lot of business in Hemet, it was very expensive for them to service the few remaining customers. And so they went to Agra Empire and they said, how about you start using trucks? And their response was, well, you know, we do a lot of business with your railroad up in the Central Valley with potatoes that we have up there, so maybe we'll put it all on trucks. And the railroad said, no. That's because they were making money in the Central Valley. So that went on for a few years, and then it just got to be so problematical. Word came down on the Santa Fe to lose a couple of carloads of potatoes. They took 2 or 3 mechanical refrigerator cars, and the crew parked them out someplace, made no record of it, and those cars were officially lost. Had to have known about it. And I said, this was done on a need-to-know basis only. There was no work. And the reason I know it actually happened is because I personally interviewed the 2 crew members who lost those loads. I also had a telephone conversation with a fellow who was on the crew that had to clean up the mess. So it happened. Now, this is a very heavy-duty unloading ramp that just off of Sanderson in Hemet had its own little spur. And when I first moved to Hemet in 2007, I, of course, went out and looked at the railroad, and I saw this. And I also saw that it was a very new spur on what was then an abandoned railroad. And I couldn't quite figure out what it was. My guess was that this ramp was used to unload equipment for Diamond Valley Lake. And I talked to a few people. I had one person insist, no, we never did anything with the railroad. I finally came across an accountant for Diamond Valley Lake's construction company, and she told me, yes, indeed, we did business with the railroad. We got shipments from the Santa Fe. So 1902, good passenger service between San Jacinto and San Bernardino. They had a stop in Hemet, and that was daily until the late 20s. Part of the reason they stopped it was part of the reason that eventually killed all the railroad passenger business by private railroads, and that was the loss of the U.S. mail contract. Regular passenger service did continue into the early 50s with a mixed train. That is, a train that carried both passenger cars and freight cars. So this is the 1947 timetable, and you can see all the stops along the way. And here's one of those mixed trains at Box Springs up in the Riverside area. This would be a typical car on those trains. It's called a combine, so it carried passengers, baggage, and railway express. Here's a scene, engine 492 at the depot. This was a major inspiration for Thomas Kincaid's famous print of the Hemet Depot. And there's that print. And here's a better view of that same locomotive. The Santa Fe operated passenger specials to Hemet for the Ramona pageant during the 60s, and also things for the Orange Empire Railway Museum in Paris, which is now the Southern California Railway Museum. A total of 17 trains operated between 62 and 68. Each one had between 14 and 15 passenger cars. There's one of the Ramona specials. And here's an excursion flyer. There's another pageant excursion train. Here's a scene from 1965. And here's the locomotives parked after delivering the cars. Here's an Orange Empire excursion. And another one. So let's talk a little about the depot and the agent. All depots are stations, but not all stations are depots. A station is merely a location listed in the employee timetable. So a station may be nothing more than a siding or a spur along the main line with no structures. So the depots all had agents, and the agent was a jack of all trades. The depot itself was the center of economic activity and a social gathering place in the community. This is a link to the outside world where you used to get your mail and telegraph messages that received passengers and freight. There were departures, of course, for passengers. And the businesses created a partnership with the railroads. Typically, news of the outside world arrived at the depot. As late as the 20s, some 75 to 80% of all U.S. intercity freight went by mail. The early depots also served as a communication point for dispatching trains and sometimes fueling locomotives. And of course, the key person at the depot was the agent. In a small town, that agent, also known as the station master, was the telegrapher, the ticket seller, baggage handler, express and freight agent, and keeper of hourly records of trains that passed and stopped. And there's a typical agent badge that would appear on his hat. And there's an agent, not at Hemet, but typical day at the office. And there's an agent doing what they call hooping up orders to the train. So the trains didn't stop to get their orders. They would get them on the fly. And the mail service. And of course, 67, the post office canceled all mail by rail. And the reason for that wasn't so much that trains were slow, it was that the trains didn't serve all the communities they used to. So it was really not reasonable to expect the railroads to deliver all the mail all over the country. Okay, express package service. Before UPS, before FedEx, before Amazon, you got your packages delivered by Railway Express or Wells Fargo. The other thing that would go on at the depot was the delivery of less than carload freight. So a boxcar would be loaded up with all kinds of freight for a community, but not enough to fill up a boxcar, and that would be delivered to the depot. And of course, for shippers, the agent was the point of contact. He knew what the local community needed, what the businesses needed, and he would order freight cars for them. And of course, this was in the days of face-to-face business. And as the years went on, most of the agent's duties were centralized off-site. Now here's the agent's residence at the Hemet Depot. It's on the second floor. And the reason they had the agent there is because the agent was basically on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When the current depot was built in 1914, they built that apartment, but it was left unfurnished. Reportedly, the stairway wasn't even completed. And the reason the agent's residence was not completed is that the agent's wife let it be known that she would refuse to live in the depot apartment. She insisted on living in a conventional home off the depot grounds. So what about the depots? Regular service to Hemet began in 1888. We have no pictures of what they used for a depot, but typically every place in the country, they would just get an old boxcar and outfit it with a desk and some other things, and that would be the depot. So Hemet had a depot that we're not going to count, but it wasn't permanent. So the railroad was delaying building a permanent depot, but one of our big civic leaders, William F. Whittier, paid the railroad to help finance a proper depot. So the first true depot was built near the current depot, and that one burned down in 1897. This is the only photo we have of that first depot. And in the back is the Hemet flour mill. As with many communities that had dry farming, they all had flour mills. So the railroad built a second permanent depot on the same site. It had facilities for passengers and freight facilities. Now they made an addition to that in 1906, doubling the freight house. So that's a drawing of what that second depot looked like. And on the right part of the drawing is the freight house. And there's the second depot in very early days. Another photo. One more. And a partial photo. That's Harvard Street in the background. Must have been something big going on when they shot this photo. Now, this is a photo of that second depot after the freight house was doubled. So keep that in mind. So the depot burned down, but it was burned in a fire exercise. But that freight house section was put on wheels and moved across the street to where the current depot is. So the freight house, which houses the museum these days, actually dates back before 1914, which is the date when the rest of that depot was built. So that's where the first and second depots were located, and this is looking from the current depot. So current depot was built in 1914. Most of the wood came from the mountains in Idlewild. And of course, I mentioned the freight house section from the second depot was used for the third depot. Again, William F. Whittier stepped in, contributed some significant money. And as a condition of his contribution, he wanted the depot painted differently than what they did in the old days, which is basically a sort of a mineral red, same as the boxcars. So here's the third depot under construction. And of course, the agent didn't live there. You know, we use that agent's quarters today as our archives and library and conference room. And here's some everyday scenes around the depot. It's a photo from the 20s. The Hemet depot was officially mile marker 36 for most of his life. And by 36, that means it's 36 miles from San Bernardino. For some reason, at one point, they marked it as 17, which is the railroad distance from Paris. Another early scene. It's about 1941. A little later. 46 photo. Another mixed train. Now this photo we know is from the World War II era. Starting in 1942, railroads across the country started putting shields over their headlights. This is to prevent them from being attacked from the air. And those shields started to come down about 1947, 1948. Oh, the other thing they did, Santa Fe had modernized its passenger equipment with stainless steel cars. And here's some of those stainless steel cars. But again, in deference to the war, they painted the roofs black. And very few photos of those cars with their roofs painted black. Very close to modern times here. Okay, this is what's called a drumhead. Most of the better passenger trains that had names would have a drumhead on the back car, announcing that they were the Super Chief or the California Limited, whatever. This was a special one-time excursion train. I found this drumhead over at the Railway Museum in Paris. That was in April of 1958. This was a group that were called the Fiesta Makers. And they took about 250 to 300 people from Los Angeles and brought them to Hemet for the Ramona pageant the following weekend. And there's one of the Farmers Fair excursion trains. The Farmers Fair used to be a real big deal in Hemet. Started with one of the major turkey growers in town and expanded into a general agricultural fair that was a pretty big deal in Hemet for many years, going up into, I think, the early 70s. And here's a scene of the potato rush. One of the reasons potatoes were a major crop in the area is that in many areas around Hemet and San Jacinto, the soil is such that it allows the farmers to keep the potatoes in the ground a little longer than other areas. And by doing that, the farmers can then best time the market. They don't need to pull the potatoes up until they can get the most money for them. There's one of the locals turning on the Y. Here's one of the locals with a string of refrigerator cars. Here's an inspection train. Another general freight train. But the line was pulled out of service. Right now, the line comes out of Riverside and High Grove and goes down to just a little bit east of the 215 freeway, and it serves a lumber yard. From there on, the tracks have been pulled up in various areas, so there's no way to run a train down this way. So Santa Fe closed that depot in '63, and they abandoned it in '87. They tried to sell the land to the city, and that didn't work. The property was one whole city block. Nice central location in downtown Hemet. So the railroad's asking price back in those days was $400,000. So that would be a ton of money today. The Santa Fe didn't get the sale to the city, and they were going to demolish the depot. So a lot of people in town wanted to save that depot. And you got to remember, this is an era when historic preservation wasn't all that prominent. Of course, you all know about historic preservation and you appreciate it. So anyway, a group in Hemet got together and they started Save Our Station. And they worked to negotiate with the railroad. Even Engineer Bill, some of you, if you grew up locally, you remember Engineer Bill on Channel 9. He came down to help out. And of course, they had hats and buttons and whatever. So the asking price was just a little bit too much. So Jim Miner, who was head of Agra Empire in that time, and a major satisfied customer at that time, entered the negotiations. And through his influence, the Santa Fe agreed to sell the southern triangular portion of the block and depot to Save Our Station for $170,000. So negotiations began. The city helped by paying rent while those negotiations went on. So SOS took over the lease payments. They got a grant. The Hemet Area Museum Association offered to donate its treasury, and agreement that the freight house would become a museum. So this is what we have. This was the whole block that the Santa Fe initially wanted to sell. This is what eventually was sold. So that used to be a lumber yard. It's now a car wash and some other small businesses. And there's a board inside of the depot recognizing the people that contributed. So the depot needed restoration. It's one of the oldest structures in downtown Hemet, having the one part built in 1914 and the other built before then. The wood foundation was in terrible shape, so they had to replace that. So this is just after the depot was acquired. Here it is awaiting restoration. They replaced quite a bit. There was a problem. There was a violent windstorm and it almost blew the freight house over. So they had to go back in and shore that up and build some permanent supports. So there's the depot when it's jacked up awaiting foundation work. And that's when the restoration was coming along quite nicely. We have a nice historic plaque. And here's another restoration. the late Howard Wampler built an exact model of the depot. If you lift off the roof on this model, you can see the interior has been completely outfitted too. So those three groups merged to become the current organization, Hemet Heritage Foundation. The museum opened in the Freight House, and we focus on local history, and we feature photographs and artifacts of old Hemet, the Ramona pageant, Native American artifacts, and agricultural displays. We have that famous Thomas Kincaid print on display, and we sell copies of that. And each year we conduct tours for third graders throughout Hemet. And we guide them along, much as you have here with a lot of the older artifacts. We show those to the children and demonstrate how they were used, such as the old irons that you had to heat on the stove, washboards, things like that. And it blows their mind. These kids are in this modern era. They just don't know how things were done until you show them. So here's some of the exhibits. And of course, like all good museums, we have a gift and bookshop. So, future of the depot. The Riverside County Transportation Commission now owns the old Santa Fe right-of-way, all the way from High Grove down to San Jacinto. They've determined that extending the Paris line, which operates these days from South Paris to Riverside, and maybe to Temecula would be feasible. Of course, 1916, Metrolink service came to Paris and South Paris, leaving just another 14 miles to cover to get to Hemet. How many of you have ridden the train into LA? Oh, it's a wonderful trip. And if you really need to go to downtown LA, you're going to get there during rush hour in about the same amount of time, and you're going to save around $40 in parking fees. So I've done it a couple of times. It's a nice, pleasant ride. The cars are very comfortable. And from downtown Los Angeles, you can take any of the Metro Rail trains to various places around Southern California.
You ever go across the street and meet a police?
What?
Meet a police?
Yeah. Yeah. So the depot is not going to be part of any future transportation center. They've designated an area for a transit mobility hub in downtown Hemet, just a little north of the depot. And that'll become a multimodal center surrounded by high-density residential office and mixed-use projects. The plan has been laid out. There's no timetable for this. So here's the depot, and then heading north towards San Jacinto, this is where the mobility hub site is going to be. And of course, as of even today, there's no specific timetable for the project. But someday we do hope to get Metrolink service to Hemet. So with that, we'll say goodbye to 3 centuries of railroads and depots in Hemet. Do we have any questions or comments?
Two or three questions. I guess Railroad Canyon, that's where they got their name for Railroad Canyon. Must have been the train line going
Right.
up through there.
Yeah, that was the old main line.
And you say it didn't last long, or it got washed out, or?
It didn't get washed out. It was abandoned because of the washouts in Temecula Canyon.
Okay.
So, I mean, they had a line through there. They sold a portion of it to what became the developer of Canyon Lake,
Yeah.
and it's flooded. So there's just the dirt roadbed leading up to Canyon Lake, and then north of there, you can see a little bit more, and that goes right up to Paris.
And do they still offer train rides? I think up in Paris. I remember we took the grandkids. They were probably
Oh, at the
20
museum?
some- yeah.
Yes, they do.
And I forget how far was that train ride. It seemed like it was short, but
They
it
go
was-
from where the museum is about 3, maybe 4 miles up into downtown Paris.
Yeah.
And they do that on the weekends. And then the other big thing that happens there that the kids really love is Thomas the Tank Train comes
yeah.
in.
Yeah.
And so they have a weekend for that. That's apparently a really big fundraiser for them.
Yeah. I think I wore my pinstripe coveralls and got me a railroad cap to ride along with my grandson on it. That was a lot of fun. And then it's not the Hemet area, but what is the rail line that still runs through like Palmdale, Lancaster? And does that come out of downtown LA?
It's a roundabout way. It's a Southern Pacific line that they built not too long ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still active, very
Oh,
active.
yeah, it is.
And I understand they have Metrolink service from Palmdale into Los Angeles.
Yes, they do. Okay, well, very good. Thank you for your information. It's quite interesting.
You made reference to some of the rail cars being stainless steel. Is there a reason they were stainless steel, or do you?
It's outside maintenance is a little bit easier that way. Some of the railroads opted for just regular steel siding, which they could paint. And of course, those passenger trains just leading into World War II and thereafter were very colorful in the most part. You know, they were proud of them and they wanted them as rolling advertising. But the Santa Fe stuck with the stainless steel because it was easier to maintain.
I understand that you're currently trying to re-roof the station. Is
Yes.
it intended to be the same pattern of roofing with that old style square sheets that Johns Mansville made back in the 20s?
I'm glad you mentioned that because that's one of my personal projects. We've got some leaks in the roof, and the roof needs to be repaired or even replaced. The problem is those old tiles have asbestos in them. So our choices are, I've been investigating this for a little while. Our choices are to have that roof repaired and encapsulated, where they put some sort of a coating on it that supposedly keeps in the asbestos, and that would be guaranteed for 10 years. The other thing is to completely replace it, but if we do, we will replace it with roofing tiles that look like the current. Now, interestingly, I've seen some old photos of the depot, some I had here, but you can't see them unless you blow them up. The tiles that are on there now were not originally on the depot. So at some point, and I'm thinking probably in the early 20s, they replaced them. Too bad, asbestos.
The other comment I had was that the rail line through Paris at the Railroad Museum is we're currently closed because we're running the Harry Potter special. And so if anyone wants to enjoy Harry Potter, come to the museum.
Oh,
Look at their website.
I think there was a question there in the back.
Where's the original Kincaid painting?
Where is it?
Yeah.
I don't know where the original is. We have some very good copies. He had relatives that lived in Hemet. That's one of the reasons he did that painting.
My question is about the agent. Did the agent have to take some type of oath or become a registered, official of some kind for all the responsibilities that the agent had to handle?
I really don't know.
Because I've seen agents mentioned in old lawsuits that I was studying as a very important witness to things that passed through the station that were like forfeitures and things like that. And I thought, man, the agent would have seen everything.
Yes, he would have. There's a question over there.
Yes, I was just curious on the tracks that run through Winchester, going on Winchester Road, coming through Winchester.
Okay, little louder.
Oh, I was curious, the tracks that run through Winchester,
Yes.
right there that we cross. Did those tie in with the Hemet San Jacinto's? And I was just wondering because they're still there with the
No, they were.
the rails
They would
and
be.
everything.
They would be a part of the line from Lake Elsinore down all the way through. Well, Winchester was on the line. Was that your question, Winchester? Yeah. Winchester. Yeah, Winchester was on that line from Paris to Hemet. And of course, the community of Winchester got screwed over when they built the Hemet Dam because as the way the laws about water in the western states, it's who's ever highest up on the source can control the water. And they built the dam and all of a sudden Winchester didn't have all the water they used to have. So that was sort of bad for them.
Yeah, I have a question too. It deals with the mail cars. You indicated they quit doing the mail service because they didn't stop at all the communities along the route. My understanding, and this may be incorrect, is for those communities, what they would do, they would hang the mail. There would be a pouch that would hang the mail. As the train went through, they had a long hook that would grab the pouch, take it in. They'd sort the mail in the car,
Right.
put them in the appropriate pouches, and they'd have a different hook where they would place the mail on a pouch on a hook in that community. So they were able to pick it up and pick mail up as well as deliver mail with the train not stopping. Those
Right. When I said that train not stopping, that the railroads had actually abandoned so many communities. There's no service. But you're right. Yeah, the railway postal cars had a hook arrangement where they would come by and they would grab that bag of mail, a pouch of mail, and then to deliver it, they just toss it out on the station platform on the run. Now, those railway express agents who were postal service workers, I guess because of problems they had with bandits going back before 1900, they carried guns. All of them were armed. So.
When the museum's open, you can see our full-length baggage postal car. We have a postal car there with the bag set up outside as a display. You can see how it's done.
Good.
Do you have any stories of any local train robberies?
No.
Nothing exciting?
I do think, I spend entirely too much time on Facebook. And I think I did see an article about a robbery that occurred in this area, but I didn't save it. Like I say, I have, in addition to this interest, I have 4 websites that I maintain. One of them is, 2 of them are called Model Railroads of Southern California. One's on Facebook, the other's on Groups.io. I also have a site on Groups.io called the Railroad Citrus Industry Modeling Group. So I'm always on the internet looking for things about the local citrus industry. And then because of that site, which we deal with refrigerator cars that carried citrus, I used to get a lot of questions about carrying meat. And I didn't care about carrying meat, but I eventually had to break down and develop a site for those people. So I talk about railway livestock cars and meat reefers, and that's known as the Railway Bull Shippers Group. But again, it's too much time on Facebook and researching, you're a historical society here, you have a website, and there are so many of these scattered throughout the country, and I'll get a lead on one and I'll go through and they have photos, and occasionally I'll find some really great photos that's railway related that nobody else has. So, and then I share that with other groups.
How long is Railway Express connected with the railroad?
I don't know.
When is your museum open?
Our museum is open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock. We were closed during July. I think we are open now. And we just got a new business in. It's a coffee business, Rendezvous Coffee, where we used to have the barbecue place that was such a problem. Good food, terrible tenant.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much, Bob. Very interesting presentation. As always, appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you.
Couple of things. Save the date. Our annual Temecula Valley Historical Society meeting and luncheon is going to be on November the 12th. And we're still finalizing details. Some more information will be forthcoming. Pay attention to the newsletters as well as also we'll announce at these events. So that's November the 12th, Thursday. Jim Risserson, once again, if you have any interest in learning about his trip to Malta next year, that's the guy to talk with. And then next month, once again, we're going to have a presentation on the Flaybob Airport in Riverside. So with all that being said, thank you so much for being here this evening. And boy, is it comfortable in here, isn't it? Yay. All right. Had to say something. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, everybody.